The massive doors of the Galactic Council chambers groaned open like the gates of hell itself. Admiral Park Hyanmu stepped through. His black military uniform spotless despite commanding 3 different space battles just this week. The polished medals on his chest caught the artificial light, each one representing a human colony that had been wiped out by the aliens now cowering before him. Behind him walked Captain Lee Sojin, her combat boots echoing against the marble floor with mechanical precision. Her hand rested on her plasma sidearm, fingers drumming a slow rhythm that made every alien in the room nervous. She had earned her reputation in the Titan massacre, where she single-handedly held off a Corithan assault squad for 6 hours while civilians evacuated. The moment they entered, alien dignitaries scrambled to their feet like insects fleeing from light. Some knocked over their ceremonial chairs in their haste. The mighty Vorthic Chancellor, whose crystalline body usually glowed with arrogant pride, now flickered with nervous energy. His translator device sparked as he rushed to speak. "Please, Admiral Park." The Chancellor's voice crackled through the universal translator, the electronic tone failing to hide his desperation. "We offer complete surrender of the Outer Rim territories, all 17 systems, with full mining rights and trade agreements." Hyanmu stopped in the center of the chamber, his dark eyes scanning the room like a predator studying prey. 23 different alien species surrounded him, the same species that had once looked down on humanity as nothing more than primitive space monkeys barely worth enslaving. The Zalani delegates with their tentacled faces pressed against the floor, the proud Corithan warriors, once called the Star Gods, now trembling like children. The irony wasn't lost on him. 6 months ago, these same creatures had sat in these same chairs, debating whether humanity deserved complete extinction or just enslavement. They had laughed when human ambassadors begged for a peace. They had made jokes about human weakness. While broadcasting the execution of civilian transports, "You burned our children on New Terra," Hyanmu said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent chamber like a death sentence. "I was there. I watched 12-year-old Park Minseo die in her mother's arms while your soldiers took pictures." The Chancellor's crystalline form began to shake, light patterns flickering across his surface in what humans had learned was extreme fear. That was different. Those were military decisions. We can negotiate terms. Different. Sojin stepped forward, her voice cutting through the alien's pleas like a vibroblade through flesh. "Tell me what was different about executing children. Tell me what was military about burning hospitals." Her hand moved to her communicator, and suddenly the chamber's massive holographic display activated. The 3-dimensional map showed the current state of the galaxy, and it was terrifying for anyone who wasn't human. 12 star systems now flew human flags. Red markers indicated human fleet positions, and there were far more than anyone had imagined possible. The hegemony fleet, once the most feared military force in known space, was scattered across 3 sectors, running from human hunter-killer groups. The legendary Corithan battle fortress of Eternal Victory was now a floating debris field, destroyed in a battle that lasted exactly 14 minutes. "Impossible," whispered the Zalani representative, his translator struggling with the alien shock. "Your species only discovered faster than light traveled to centuries ago. How do you have so many ships?" Sojin smiled, and the expression was anything but friendly. "While you were busy celebrating our supposed inferiority, we were building. Every insult, every act of cruelty, every dead human child became a new shipyard. You taught us that survival required strength. We learned that lesson very well." The display zoomed in on individual battle zones, the mining world of Kelthi, where human prisoners had once died in forced labor, was now under complete human control. The pleasure planet of Zephyra, where alien elites had hunted human slaves for sport, was evacuated and quarantined. Each conquered world bore memorial sites for the humans who had died there. The human fleet will continue its advance, Hyanwu announced, his words echoing through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Every world that participated in the genocide will face justice. Every species that voted for our extinction will learn what extinction feels like. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. The Vorthek Chancellor's light pattern shifted to deep purple, the color of absolute terror in their species. But the civilians, surely you won't harm innocent civilians, innocent. Sojin's laugh was sharp as broken glass. Were the children, are New Terra not innocent? Were the medical staff on Sanctuary Station not innocent? You didn't seem concerned about innocence when you were selling human families in your slave markets. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Multiple species began talking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of desperate pleas, offers of tribute, promises of service. Some offered their entire military fleets. Others promised to return stolen human artifacts or to provide information about other species' war crimes. But Hyanwu and Sojin had already turned away, walking toward the exit with measured steps. The sound of their boots on the marble floor was the only clear sound in the chaos dot as they reached the doors. Hyanwu paused and looked back one final time, 6 months ago. You called us weak for showing mercy. Today, you'll learn what human strength really looks like. The massive doors slammed shut behind them, leaving the former masters of the galaxy alone with their fear and the terrible knowledge that the prey had finally become the Who. NTER. Colonel Kim Taehyung stood on the observation deck of the HSS Retribution, his scarred hands gripping the metal railing as he watched the fireworks display outside. But these weren't celebration fireworks. They were orbital defense platforms exploding in brilliant white flashes against the black void of space. Each explosion was a work of art. Precisely timed and perfectly executed, the human torpedo crews had spent weeks studying the station layouts, identifying exactly which sections housed military equipment and which contained civilian life support. When the Kelth Prime orbital stations died, they died clean. No innocent blood on human hands. Beautiful work, Taehyung muttered, watching as the massive Kelth defense grid, once considered impenetrable, became nothing more than glowing debris. The same grid that had fired on unarmed human refugee ships 3 years ago, turning families into vapor while alien crowds cheered from the viewing platforms behind him. Lieutenant Choi Minna worked frantically at her communications console, her fingers dancing across holographic controls. The young officer had lost her entire family in the Kelth labor camps, and today felt like justice finally being served. Her voice crackled with barely controlled emotion as she monitored dozens of communication channels simultaneously. Sir, the surface installations are requesting permission to surrender, she reported, her voice tight with years of suppressed rage. The Keld Mining Authority is offering complete capitulation. They're actually begging, Sir. Taehyung turned away from the spectacular destruction outside and looked at his communications officer. Minna had been just 15 when the Keld authorities dragged her parents away to the mining pits. She'd spent 5 years in foster care on Earth, dreaming of this moment. Tell them surrender was an option 6 months ago, Taehyung replied, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated grief. Before they executed Ambassador Park Sung-ho and his entire diplomatic team on live broadcast. Before they made entertainment out of human suffering on the planet below, the real work was beginning. Human Marines in powered armor were systematically dismantling the massive mining complexes that had once worked human prisoners to death. These weren't random attacks. Each facility had been carefully mapped. Each building identified by the human intelligence network that had spent decades documenting alien war crimes. The Kelthvi mining complex, where over 3,000 humans had died in the first year alone, was being taken apart piece by piece. Human engineers used precision plasma cutters to carefully remove each section, preserving evidence of the atrocities while ensuring nothing useful remained for the aliens to rebuild. At each dismantled facility, Marine chaplain Yang Junsik placed memorial plaques bearing the names of those who had died there. Park Jin-ho, age 23, died of exhaustion in Pit 7. Kim Hae-won, age 19, executed for attempting to help a sick friend. Lee Sang-woo, age 31, killed for refusing to work on his daughter's birthday. The list went on and on, each name a reminder of why humanity had chosen vengeance over forgiveness. Colonel Min-ah called out, her voice suddenly filled with disbelief. "We're receiving priority transmissions from the Hegemony First Fleet. There, sir. They're offering to return all human artifacts they've stolen over the past century. Art, cultural items, even the bodies of our dead for a proper burial." Taehyung almost smiled, but it was the kind of smile that made hardened soldiers uncomfortable. The Hegemony fleet that spent decades raiding human colonies for souvenirs. The same fleet that turned our museums into trophy rooms. Yes, sir, Admiral Zeta himself is on the channel. He's offering full reparations, territorial concessions, even tribute payments. Tell Admiral Zeta that his offer is noted and rejected. Remind him that we asked for the return of our cultural heritage 20 years ago. After the raid on New Athens, his response then was, and I quote, "The inferior should be honored to contribute to the superior." Minna's fingers flew across her console, transmitting the message. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear the alien admiral's desperate response, his translator struggling to convey the panic in his voice. Outside, the human fleet moved through space like a surgical instrument, each ship in perfect formation. The HSS Vengeance was systematically hunting down Kelth patrol vessels, disabling them with electromagnetic pulse weapons before boarding and documenting war crimes. The Chess Justice was laying siege to the Kelth Military Academy, the same institution that had trained officers to view human suffering as entertainment. Double quotes, sir. Tactical reports coming in from the other task forces, reported Senior Lieutenant Park Woo-jin from the tactical station. The 7th Fleet has successfully captured the Kelth High Command. The 12th Fleet has secured the civilian evacuation zones. 0 human casualties reported. This was the new reality of galactic warfare. Humans didn't just fight. They revolutionized combat itself. Every battle was planned months in advance. Every target selected for maximum psychological impact. The aliens had taught humanity that war was about breaking the enemy's spirit, and humans had proven to be excellent students. Incoming transmission from the surface. Mina announced. General and Jae-sung reports that Kelth City has been secured. The government building is surrounded, and they're requesting instructions. Taehyung walked to the main view screen, looking down at the planet that had once been humanity's graveyard. The massive cities that had been built on human suffering now flew white flags of surrender. The alien civilians huddled in their homes, finally understanding what fear felt like. Tell General and to proceed with Phase 3. Humanitarian corridors are to be maintained. Medical aid stations are to be established. And remind him, we're not here to become monsters. We're here to ensure monsters learn the price of their crimes. The human fleet continued its methodical advance, rewriting the rules of galactic civilization one conquered world at a time. They weren't just winning battles. They were teaching the galaxy that there were consequences for treating humans as less than sentient beings. As the last of Kelth Prime's orbital defenses fell, the message was clear. Humanity had learned the lessons their enemies taught them. And now it was time for the final exam. Ambassador Yoon Soo-young walked into the emergency session of the Galactic Council like she owned the place. Her simple black diplomatic suit stood out against the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor of the alien representatives. Every eye in the massive chamber followed her as she made her way to the speaker's podium, the same podium where human pleas for mercy had been laughed at just months before. The silence was deafening. Former rulers of the galaxy sat in their ornate chairs like children caught stealing cookies, their usual arrogance replaced by barely concealed terror. The mighty Vorthok Chancellor's crystalline body flickered with nervous slight patterns. The Zolani Prime Minister's tentacles writhed anxiously round his ceremonial staff. Even the proud Korathan war leader, whose species had conquered half the galaxy, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Sudashion had survived the Europa Station massacre. She had watched her husband and daughter die, while alien spectators cheered. The scars on her left arm were still visible, souvenirs from Korathan plasma weapons. Today, those same weapons were pointed at their former owners. "You want to know why we refuse your peace offerings?" she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Every word hit like a hammer blow. You sit there with your trembling appendages and quivering voice boxes, offering us territory and tribute, but you still don't understand what you've done. She pressed the control on the podium, and the chamber's massive holographic display activated. The three-dimensional projection showed archived footage from Europa Station, the Outer Rim research facility that had housed 20,000 human civilians, including 8,000 children. The footage was crystal clear. Security cameras had captured everything as Korathan shock troops stormed through the station's corridors. Families huddled together in panic as alien soldiers herded them into the main plaza. Children cried for their parents. Parents begged for their children's lives. "This is what you call justice," Su Yang continued, her voice never wavering even as the hologram showed human families being executed while alien crowds cheered from the viewing platforms. "Watch carefully. See that little girl with the pink dress? That's my daughter, Min Yung. She was 10 years old." The chamber watched in horrified silence as the child on screen was separated from her parents. The Korathan soldier raised his weapon, and several alien representatives actually turned away. But Su Yang forced them to watch. "Don't look away now," she commanded. "You sold tickets to this execution. You broadcast it across 17 star systems for entertainment. The Zolani News Network called it the final solution to the human problem. Your children watched this and learned that murder was acceptable. If the victims were human, the hologram shifted to show newspaper headlines from across the galaxy. Inferior species finally eliminated. Human plague cleansed from Europa. Korathan military provides galactic service. Each headline was accompanied by celebration footage from alien worlds. The triumvirate of eldest races, the Vorthok, Zolani, and Korathans, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. These three species had been the architects of human genocide, dividing human space among themselves like spoils of war. The Vorthok had taken the mining worlds, working humans to death in crystal mines. The Zolani had claimed the agricultural planets, using humans as slave labor in their food production facilities. The Korathans had seized the strategic worlds, turning human civilians into gladiator entertainment. When we begged for mercy, you called us weak. Su Yang's voice grew colder. When we offered peaceful solutions, you called us naive. When we proposed trade agreements, you laughed and said insects don't negotiate with farmers. Zolani Prime Minister Gik's highest translator spoke as he tried to speak. Ambassador Yoon. "Surely we can discuss reparations, discuss Su Yang's." Laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "The time for discussion ended when you made popcorn to watch our children die. But please, continue. Tell me about reparations while my daughter's ashes float in space round Europa Station." She pressed another control, and the holographic display changed. Now, it showed the current galactic situation, but this view was different from what the aliens had seen before. This showed the true extent of human military power. We learned from the best teachers. Su Yang smiled, and the expression was terrifying. You taught us that mercy is weakness, that honor means nothing to predators, that the strong take what they want from the weak. We learned your lessons. Very, very well. The new hologram revealed human fleet positions across the galaxy, and there were far more than anyone had imagined. Ships hidden in asteroid fields, camouflaged bases in nebulae. Entire fleets operating in the dark spaces between stars for 50 years, while aliens celebrated human extinction. Humans had been building. Impossible, whispered the Vorthok Chancellor. Our intelligence networks would have detected such construction. Your intelligence networks were run by the same species that thought humans were too stupid to pose a threat. Commander Park Jamin spoke from the human delegation. He was the military attaché, a veteran of the underground resistance. You were so busy congratulating yourselves on our destruction that you never noticed our survivors. Building shipyards in dead solar systems, the hologram zoomed in on specific locations, the Crab Nebula, where humans had hollowed out asteroids to build massive shipyards. The Ghost Sector, where an entire human fleet had been constructed using resources from abandoned alien mining operations, the Dark Zone, where human scientists had spent decades developing weapons specifically designed to counter alien technology. Every human world you destroyed became a recruitment center. Su Yang continued. Every murdered child became motivation for 10 more engineers. Every celebration of our death became fuel for our rebirth. The Korathan war leader finally found his voice. But this is impossible. We monitored all human survivors. There were less than 50 million left. 50 million very angry survivors. Commander Park replied, with very long memories and very good organizational skills. Did you really think we'd just roll over and die because you said so? The holographic display now showed the human fleet in action, ships that moved like ghosts through space, appearing without warning to strike alien installations before vanishing again. Weapons that turned alien shields into weaknesses, tactics that turned the aliens' own technology against them. You created us, Su Yang concluded, every act of cruelty. Every celebration of our suffering, every time you called us weak, you were forging the weapon that would destroy you. Congratulations, you succeeded beyond your wildest dreams. The silence in the chamber was complete. The former masters of the galaxy sat frozen, finally understanding that they hadn't eliminated humanity. They had transformed it into something far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The prey had become the ultimate predator, and the hunt was just beginning. General Andomin watched through the reinforced viewport of the HSS Judgment as the impossible happened before his eyes. The legendary Zentari Prime defense grid, boasted by the Korathans as the impenetrable shield of the gods, was falling apart like a house of cards in a hurricane. Massive orbital platforms that had protected the Korathan homeworld for over a millennium were exploding in sequence, each detonation creating a brilliant fireball against the backdrop of space. The Eternal Fortress, a moon-sized battle station that had never been damaged in 1,000 years of warfare, now listed helplessly to one side as human plasma torpedoes punched through its supposedly invincible armor. Sir, Korathan commanders, screaming for reinforcements on all frequencies, reported Major Song Yujin from a tactical station. The young officer had lost her brother in the Korathan gladiator pits, and today felt like Christmas morning. Their 12th battle fleet is in full retreat. The 17th defense wing has been completely destroyed. Domin nodded grimly as he watched human strike fighters weave through the chaos like deadly ballet dancers, the F-89 Wraith fighters. painted matte black and nearly invisible against the void, moved with predatory grace between the bulky Corthan interceptors, where alien ships relied on brute force and heavy shielding. Human craft used speed, stealth, and precision. "Look at them run," muttered Captain Lehyojin from the observation deck. "The mighty star gods, fleeing like frightened children. Where's all that divine superiority now?" The Korathans had always called themselves gods, their golden armor, their massive temples, their arrogant proclamations of racial superiority. Everything about their culture was designed to make other species feel inferior. They had ruled through fear and intimidation for centuries, crushing any species that dared to challenge their authority. But humans had learned something the Korathans never expected. Gods could bleed. "Sir, incoming priority transmission," Eugen announced, her voice tight with barely contained excitement. "It's from the Korathan Emperor himself. He's requesting a direct channel." Dongmin straightened his uniform and walked to the command chair. The Emperor had personally ordered the execution of every human diplomat on Centauri Prime 5 years ago, broadcasting their deaths as entertainment for his subjects today. That same Emperor was about to learn what consequences felt. Like, "Put him through." The main screen flickered to life, showing the Emperor's golden visage in all its artificial glory. His face was a work of art, genetically modified to appear perfect, with golden skin that literally glowed with embedded nanocircuits. But today, that divine composure was cracking like a broken mask. "General N," the Emperor began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone who had never been denied anything. "Surely we can reach an accommodation. The Korathan Empire is prepared to offer significant concessions, the same accommodation you offered the children of New Terra," Dongmin interrupted, his voice cutting through the Emperor's diplomatic words like a blade. "The same mercy you showed Ambassador Park Minho and his entire diplomatic team when you had them executed on live broadcast." The Emperor's golden features flickered with uncertainty. Behind him, the throne room that had once been the symbol of divine authority was now occupied by human marines in powered armor. The sight of human soldiers standing where no alien had ever dared to tread sent a clear message. The gods had fallen. Those were different circumstances, the Emperor stammered, his divine confidence evaporating. "Military necessities. The humans had violated. The only violation was being human in your presence," Dongmin replied coldly. "Tell me, your divine majesty, what was the military necessity of feeding Ambassador Park to your pet war beasts while your nobles placed bets on how long he would survive?" The Emperor's face went pale beneath his golden skin. Through the palace windows behind him, the glow of burning Korathan ships could be seen lighting up the sky. The eternal city of Centauri Prime, which had never known defeat, was now under siege by the very species they had dismissed as inferior. "The Korathan Empire has ruled for 3,000 years, the Emperor said desperately. "We have knowledge, technology, cultural treasures that would benefit all species. Surely we can negotiate. 3,000 years of oppression," Dongmin corrected. 3,000 years of slavery, genocide, and calling it divine will. Your empire ends today. Behind the Emperor, human marines moved with professional efficiency through the palace corridors. These weren't random soldiers. They were the children and grandchildren of Korathan victims, trained from birth for this moment. Sergeant Kim Taiwan, whose grandmother had died in the Korathan breeding camps, now stood guard over the very throne where her death had been ordered. "The only circumstance that matters now is this," Dongmin continued, his voice carrying the weight of accumulated human rage and conditional surrender. "Or we turn your precious home world into space debris. Your choice." The Emperor's divine mask finally cracked completely. "You cannot. The Korathan people. There are billions of innocents. Were the human children on New Terra not innocent? Dongmin asked quietly. Were the human families in your gladiator pits not innocent? You had 60 years to think about innocence. Time's up. Outside the palace, the battle for Centauri Prime raged on. Human fighters danced between Corathan interceptors like wolves hunting among sheep. The massive Corathan dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small city, were being systematically torn apart by human attack craft that struck like lightning and vanished like ghosts. Sir, tactical reports, Eugen announced. The Corathan home fleet is down to 30% strength. Their planetary defense grid is completely offline. Admiral Kim Sang-ho reports that the Corathan military command is ready to surrender. Dongmin looked back at the Emperor, whose golden features now showed something Corathans had never experienced before: genuine fear. You have 1 hour to decide, he said. Reaching for the communication control, surrender unconditionally, or watch your homeworld burn. The transmission cut off, leaving the Emperor alone with his failing empire and the terrible realization that the gods had finally met their match outside. Human fighters continued their deadly dance, proving that divine authority meant nothing against human determination and rage. The star gods were learning that mortality was a harsh teacher, and the lesson was just beginning. President Beck-in, who walked into the Galactic Council chambers like he owned the universe, and in many ways, he did. The massive room that had once echoed with alien laughter at human suffering now fell silent. At his approach, 23 different species sat in chairs that seemed too big for them now, their former arrogance replaced by the cold fear of conquered peoples. The irony was perfect. 6 months ago, these same aliens had sat in these same seats, casually discussing whether humanity deserved complete extinction or just permanent enslavement. They had made jokes about human weakness while voting on which species would get to divide up human colonies. Today, they sat like students waiting for their final grades. Knowing they had already failed, In-ho took his place at the podium that had once been used to mock human pleas for mercy. Behind him stood Vice President Hung Yijin, her military decorations gleaming under the chamber's lights. She had been a fighter pilot during the worst days of the war, personally responsible for destroying 3 Corathan battle cruisers. Today, she carried a data pad that would reshape the galaxy. The Terran Accords are non-negotiable, In-ho announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Every word landed like a hammer blow on alien hearts that had never known fear before. Every species that participated in the genocide will submit to human oversight. Your military capabilities will be limited to system defense only. Your expansion beyond your current borders will be controlled by human administrators. The silence was deafening. The Vorthok Chancellor, whose crystalline body had once glowed with arrogant pride, now flickered like a dying light bulb. The Zolani Prime Minister's tentacles writhed nervously around his ceremonial staff. Even the proud Corathan representative, whose species had called themselves gods, kept his eyes fixed on the floor. Furthermore, In-ho continued, all former human territories seized during the genocide will be returned immediately. All human artifacts, cultural items, and yes, even the remains of our dead will be returned for proper burial. The galaxy spent decades treating human lives as worthless. Time to learn their true value. The former Chancellor of the Vorthok raised a trembling appendage, his translator sparking with nervous energy. President Beck, surely after all this time, we can discuss modifications to these terms. The Vorthok Collective has always been willing to negotiate. Time. In-ho's voice cut through the chamber like a vibroblade through flesh. You want to talk about time? Tell me about the time you spent deciding whether to execute human children quickly or slowly for better entertainment value. Tell the families of the 80,000 dead on Europa Station about time. Tell Ambassador Park Min-ho's widow about time while she waits for his body to be returned from your trophy collections." The Chancellor's crystalline form began to dim. As fear overwhelmed his bioluminescent systems, in the audience, several alien representatives actually flinched at the mention of their crimes. They had spent so long thinking of humans as inferior that they had forgotten humans had memories. Vice President Han Yijin stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor with military precision, the data pad in her hands. Contained the new structure of galactic civilization, written in human blood and alien tears. The protectorate zones have been established, she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had personally bombed alien and military installations. Human administrators will oversee all former enemy territories. Educational systems will be reformed to eliminate supremacist propaganda. Trade will be conducted under human supervision. Any act of aggression against human citizens or human interests will result in immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The chamber's massive holographic display activated, showing the new galactic map. It was a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just 1 year ago. Human space, once reduced to a few scattered refugee settlements, now dominated the galaxy. Green zones marked human core worlds, blue zones showed human protectorates, and red zones indicated former enemy territories under direct human administration. The Korathan homeworld of Centauri Prime, once the proud capital of a galactic empire, now flew human flags alongside memorial sites for human victims. The Vorthik crystal mines, where humans had once died in slave labor, were now operated by human companies employing alien workers under strict labor protection laws. The Zalani agricultural worlds, where human families had been worked to death in food production facilities, now fed human colonies under human management. "But this is slavery," protested the Zalani representative, his translator struggling to convey his species' outrage. "You're reducing us to second-class citizens in our own territories." Inho turned to look directly at the alien, and his smile was colder than the vacuum of space. "No," he replied quietly. "Slavery is what you did to us. Slavery is when you worked human children to death in your mines and called it character building. Slavery is when you bred humans like livestock and sold families at auction. This is justice." The holographic display zoomed in on specific worlds, showing the transformation taking place across the galaxy. Human peacekeepers maintained order, while alien populations learned new rules. Schools that had once taught alien supremacy now educated young aliens about the value of all sentient life. Museums that had displayed human skulls as trophies now served as memorial sites for the victims of genocide. The species that once enslaved humanity now live under human protection. Yijin continued, reading from her data pad. "Your very existence depends on human goodwill. Your children will grow up in a galaxy where treating other sentient beings as inferior is not just morally wrong, but practically impossible. The transformation was complete and irreversible." Human engineering cores were rebuilding alien worlds, according to human standards of civil rights and planetary management. Human medical teams were treating alien populations with the same care they would show human patients. Human teachers were educating alien children about cooperation instead of conquest. "You wanted to teach us about power," Inho concluded, looking out at the assembled representatives of former galactic masters. "Consider the lesson learned. But remember this, we didn't become monsters like you. We didn't build our empire on the bones of the innocent. We became something far more dangerous than conquerors." He paused, letting his words sink into alien minds that were still struggling to understand their new reality. "We became judges." As the session ended, the alien representatives filed out in silence, their footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. Some moved quickly, eager to escape the weight of human judgment. Others lingered, still unable to believe that their species' thousands of years of dominance had ended in less than 12 months. The galaxy had a new order, and its architects wore human faces. The species that had taught humanity that mercy was weakness had learned the hardest lesson of all, that vengeance, when executed with perfect precision and unwavering justice, creates a peace more lasting than any treaty ever could. Outside the council chambers, human ships patrolled the space lanes that had once carried slave transports filled with human cargo. Human administrators worked in offices where alien bureaucrats had once planned genocides. Human children played in parks built on worlds where their grandparents had died as slaves. The galaxy would remember this day not as the end of human suffering, but as the beginning of human justice. And in the vast archives of the reformed Galactic Library, historians would recall that when humanity finally found its strength, the universe discovered what true power looked like. The age of aliens was over. The age of humanity had begun. Asterisk, asterisk, the end, asterisk, asterisk.